Well, welcome everybody, and it is a great pleasure. I'm very glad to open this first session of the conference. That, as you know, it's dedicated to the different ways of narrating, of telling stories. Um, Let me first compliment Valentina Castagna for having organized such a promising meeting, and especially for having organized it in this beautiful place, which might be said to be the Palermo temple of storytelling. Um, As you know, not much of the literary tale is left outside the purview of the of storytelling. We might say that the first is the birth parent to the second, sort of biological parent, and so it's really a pleasure to introduce Ben Haggarty, that is a professional performance storyteller. As you know, storytelling is a very important social and cultural activities which convey moral, educational, and social values. Ben Haggarty is, I risk it, it's an example of modern storytelling. He has performed all over the world and has a working repertoire of almost 350 tales for both adult and younger audiences. From 1999 to 2001, he was Britain's first official city storyteller in Gloucester. Ben Haggarty has worked with a number of large important organizations such as the Barbican, the South Bank Centre, the Shakespeare's Globe, and of course for a number of literature festivals. He makes a significant contribution to community projects, to museums, to galleries, and also in education, as he was from 1987 to 1991 consultant to the National Oracy Project. But he's not just a storyteller, he's also a writer of tales. And one of his most known is a Mesolit, which is a graphic novel based on, say, a horror story of the Stone Age. So I hope he will say something about this tale. And I'm sure everybody will enjoy his talk. And as you know, his contribution is about the traditions and the techniques of storytelling. So I'll leave him the ground. I know he doesn't speak with a microphone, so of course for a storyteller is a terrible instrument. So please, I know.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to use that, but it might be something. Here we all are, and the thing that has really excited me about this project, thinking about it for many months now, and participating in Oxford is its title, The Bearer Beings. This assumption that we bear and we carry within us this culture, oral culture that's been mentioned already. An oral culture that includes stories, but is not just limited to story narrative. Many, many different aspects of orality. And I love it that this morning we've had this idea that that story and the ocean of stories that we swim in is water and the water of life. I think it's so pervasive that I want us to really experience it for ourselves, because this project has a big vision, but I feel we have to verify every step of it. And the only place we can start verification is within our own experience. What do we personally bear? So, oral tradition. A lot of people think, oh, the oral tradition, the storytellers, the bards, the minstrels of long ago, it's all dead and lost, particularly in the West. It's certainly not dead and lost in parts of Asia and in India and all over Africa. It's very alive, and in South America also it's very alive. But there's an idea that it's not us. There's one immediate, evident, blindingly obvious fact, which is that we all are carriers of an oral tradition, which is our mother tongue. That is learnt immediately from one generation to another from other people. Tradition means passing things on. And I'm in the very fortunate, gorgeous position of having a second family now, and having sort of in a way missed the raising of my first family because I was out trying to make a living. I now have a 21-month-old daughter, and with a lifetime of studying language, to be able to day by day witness the process of language acquisition is quite miraculous. And it falls into this wonderful capacity that we all have, our major learning tool, which is ignored and forgotten about because it gets taken for granted, which is the body, the imitative capacity of the body, the mimicry with which we copied those great giant beings, those gods and goddess, mother, father, that are up there. We wish to become vertical. Everything is modeled. It's extraordinary. And we just don't take enough value now that we're grown up and we think we can do it all, at how much modeling is influencing first our physical capacity to move through the world, but then also our behaviors. The anger that an adult expresses probably has the same tones and notes that the parent displayed at that moment. Maybe they tried not to, maybe they tried not to, but when the child is 2.5 and being full of tantrums, then suddenly it got out. And that modeled very deeply, this is my anger, this is my channel of negativity. So we carry a lot of orally developed culture in us. And what I'm really interested in is that which belongs to everybody, that which can be shared, that which was designed to pass time, that which was designed to shorten the road, that which was designed to make community. And when we talk of culture in exile, there's a very interesting dynamic which I think we're going to engage with over the next 3 days, which is, if you like, the host country with its guests, the arrivants. Do they wish to push their culture onto them, or do the arrivants, the migrant group, do they wish to carry their culture? And where is this demand for assimilation, and where is this demand for keeping a distant home? And exile is a terrifying word, a place that we cannot go back to. So we have to create a portable home. And this dynamic is hot, raw, tough, painful, but it's there. So I want us to have a little look at what has composed our home. Each of us, we have very many different backgrounds here, but how did we arrive with our sense of what our culture is, with what we can carry without using anything? In other words, just our bodies, just our mouths, our language, our thoughts, our dreams, but it's absolutely nothing more than the clothes on my back. I don't need to carry much So we're going to look at this wonderful thing that UNESCO has called intangible cultural heritage. It means there's no object. Some of it be written down, but some of it can't be written down. And I'm going to now make a great list of verbal cultural artifacts which we all have. And as I mention these things, I want you to see, as I describe each type, and of course I don't speak Italian, so I can't give you the Italian translation of some of these things, but perhaps people can help. But see if something comes to mind that's been, that you're carrying. So, I'm going to do a list now of verbalized cultural inheritance, the gift from our ancestors. It's not in any particular order, but nursery rhymes. Yes, all of you will remember rhymes that you shared with your parents when you were very, very small. Even before the rhymes made sense. They were nonsense, but they were mysterious. Robin a bobbin, the big belly Ben. Who the hell is he? Who's Seesaw Marjorie Daw? Who's Little Jack Horner? All these wonderful creatures whose names were given so that they could rhyme with something else. An extraordinary rich learning oral culture of nursery rhyme. Then when you meet other kids, then there are the rhymes that you share amongst them, which are often quite rude. Playground rhymes, street rhymes, little ditties that are repeated, rude rephrasings of hymns that are sung, all sorts of things like that. Then there are riddles and puzzles, things to guess, set in words mysteriously. Then there are proverbs, this wonderful oral wisdom of the people carried in the proverb. And we tend to dismiss, the more literary we become, the more we dismiss proverb, because we say it's all cliched, it's not challenged. But it's extraordinary when you meet people who are non-literate, how much they depend on reinforcing their opinions by the collective assumption that is hidden inside a proverb. And proverbs are very rich, particularly West African ones, such as he who shits in the road will meet flies on his return. Or I'm sorry that these are all starting he, but the one who hesitates before taking the first step will spend his entire life standing on one leg. And there's a humour in all of this, and we have some of this. Deeply search for it, you'll find it. Then there are tongue twisters, these extraordinarily clever games of the tongue, and some of those can be embarrassing if you get them wrong. Then there's straight nonsense. Then there are lullabies, the cradle songs that mothers sing, mournful songs often, quite touchingly sad, as a new life here, and the mother has an experience of what the world contains, so a protection song, almost a magical charm. Then there are divination opportunities, things that will tell you who you're going to get married to, what you will become, tinker, tailor, soldier, sailor, rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief, all sorts of counting games there. Then there are calendar customs, a pinch and a punch for the first of the month and no returns. But there are all sorts of things that happen each year on a particular day, things that are said and done. There are opportunities for good luck and bad luck. You know, when a pigeon shits on your head, that's good luck. That's a kind of inverse situation there. When do you make a wish? You wish upon a star. You wish as you manage to successfully cut a cake without letting the sound of the blade make a noise on the plate or the board. If you can do that, you don't get something for nothing, then you can make a wish. If you can do it silently, how it was in our family. Then there are all sorts of games that people can play with language. There are secret languages. Ega yegus tegus pegi tu mega fregens egin vegis legang ego egij wegich egis kegel egit egi pegi. But there are secret languages that kids speak amongst each other. And then there's all this choosing. Dip, sky, blue, who's it, not you, O-U-T spells out, so out you go. Everybody will have stuff like that. And that is based in language, most of that. Some of it translates. some of it really doesn't. It's very idiosyncratic, it's very idiomatic, it's very vernacular, it's very held in your culture. But then there's this other list, which is the non-verbal things. So, you remember your uncle. It's always these uncles who do the missing finger trick, this, and then there are the grandfathers or grandmothers who have the fingers which jump from one to the other, and then you go like this, and then all sorts of things like that. Shortening your arms, there are lots and lots of physical tricks. Girls, generally girls, but not only girls, have this enormous complexity of wonderful agility in the clapping games and in the skipping games. Can you remember those? Perhaps you can't remember the patterns with your hands, perhaps you can if you had some, but they're so localized that it's your street or maybe your neighborhood. Go a mile down the road and actually it's a different set of patterns with a different set of words. The songs are great. I always remember in Somerset when I was very young working in schools and having to fill sort of 10 minutes at the end of a session, getting everybody to get up and show me their rhymes. And two little girls, aged about 7, doing it, clapping like this. Under the apple tree, my boyfriend said to me, kiss me, hug me, tell me that you love me. 1, 2, 3. And oh my goodness, what's happening here? Then there are tricks, all sorts of tricks that you can do using nothing, but then you can pick up a coin or a card or a piece of string or a handkerchief or a tea towel, all sorts of things like that. There are paper folds, and you can make those divination things out of paper, which you can then fold again, and it makes a water bomb, and you can chuck it at your teacher. There are all sorts of games that we share, just games that come up, chasing games, hiding games. There are knots, ways of tying string, all sorts of things. I unfortunately know how to make a hangman's knot. I wish I didn't, but I didn't even know how to make a noose. I learned that when I was 8 because hanging teddy bears was a great activity in our street. And then the culture becomes much more on its way to adulthood with how do you make things? How do you make things? How do you put things together? And how do you cook? And how do you sew? And when you get to cooking, then suddenly you're right at the heart of a culture in exile or a culture that's on the move, because food, there are several things that we heard about that are necessary for life. Food is right at the heart of it. How do I find familiar food? I must set up a market, a shop. I must make a restaurant. I must be able to sit around with my friends, my colleagues, and speak our language, share this, our food, and then when the food is gone, talk about our things, our stories, our culture, and then we begin to sing. There's a whole world of song out there. There's a whole world of music out there. And coming back to the word, the stories. So jokes, urban legends, shaggy dog tales, which are jokes which have a terrible groan at the end and took a long time, but they filled that time quite well. Ghost stories, place legends, historical legends, apocryphal biographies of famous people, scandal, gossip, and then the lengthier, more established narratives, folk tales, fables, fairy tales, legends, epics, myths, etiological stories, how things came to be. This is an enormous amount of culture that we're bearing. And as I was listing all that, I hope that one or two things came to your mind, because what we're going to do now is see what we've got in this room. I've made an assertion, now we're going to try and verify this. And I'd like you all now you can unhook these chairs to get into groups of 4, please. Just groups of 4, particularly perhaps people you don't know very well. Not people you know well, but people you either don't know or don't know very well. Break the chairs up. Break them up. All right. There seems to be a group of about 8 over here. Can you get it into, there's a group of 3 there that each 4th person. So, immediately we're encountering one of the problems, which is language. All this that is attached to our own oral culture, our own mother tongue, is jeopardized by the fact that we don't have common languages. We need bilinguality everywhere, really, but we don't have enough of it. And my work with communities in transit, particularly in the 1980s, was in Southall, where a very large Punjabi Sikh community that had been there since mid-60s and was moving to 2nd and 3rd generation. And here we found the grandparents spoke their own mother tongue, the grandchildren didn't. They spoke English. And it was pivotal on the parents to mediate that something could come from the grandparents to the grandchildren. And normally, it's the grandparents who are looking after the grandchildren. The parents are out earning a living. So this is where oral tradition is absolutely jeopardized when there's a problem of language that suddenly creeps into the community. It's a big question. So, there are 4 of you. I want you to arrange yourselves as A, B, C, D, like that. Decide who is A, B, C, and D. Write on a piece of paper, you've all got nice paper pads, your letter, so that you know who you are. A. And a big, like that. A, B, C, and D. Okay? No. Who's got a group of 3? Yes, send the 5th person to this group of 3 over here. Okay? So, what I want you to do is, you probably, your eyes may not be able to read this list. Hopefully some of you can. I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and I want you within your group to each try and contribute at least one of any of these things, from either the verbal things or the non-verbal things. I want you to share anything that you remember. And it's interesting to note, by the by, how you're reminded by things that other people bring, how it begins to pull out of you. Oh yes, there's that sort of stuff. And also I want you to note what belonged to your infancy, what belonged to your childhood, what belonged to your teenagerdom, what belonged to your adulthood. Because there are different things appropriate for, or that were implanted or given to you at different stages in your life. So just for the next 10 minutes until I stop you, share whatever you can, as much as you can. But try to pay attention to what the others are offering, because I'm wanting you to take one thing, at least one thing, from one of the others that you didn't know. Okay? Off you go. Okay, so I'm looking at body language and saying that gradually, it seems to me, more and more stuff is coming, yes? It's associating, you're suddenly remembering it's there. Across the whole of the next 3 days, you have permission to come up to me and tell me, or tell anybody else, any kind of rhyme, divination, or show me any kind of game that's here. What I want you now to do is to to get into fresh groups of 4, but this time all A's, all B's, all C's. So this should happen quite quickly. You just hold up your A's, or your B's, or your C's, and identify groups and get into fresh groups. Yes? As swiftly as you can. Did you discover that you had some of this? Are you bearing this culture? Yes? had to dig for it a little bit. But it was there? Yes? Was it fun? Yes. Good. The thing is, this material, though it's very small and fragmentary, don't undervalue it, because it lies, quite a lot of it, very deep in us, from a time of perhaps trust, familiarity, safety, the home. And when you return to it, and when you share it, all sorts of things are being signaled by an engagement with it, which can be very useful, perhaps later on. I said before that these things are for passing time. They shorten the road when you're traveling and you've got to talk about anything. Story really comes into its own for shortening the road. They're there for sharing after food, particularly amongst strangers, showing particularly these tricks and things. They relate different generations together. It's something that you learned as a child, but then you don't engage with until you're suddenly a grandfather. Oh yes! And you're skipping back 50, 60 years. You're doing a leapfrog back into the Middle Ages quite quickly with some of this stuff. It's there really to establish its common cultural property, and once you share it, you're beginning to lay the grounds of trust. Trust is emerging from it. But it needs time, and it needs a place. And in some of the contexts where people might be engaging and working, there is definitely lots and lots of time. And there is a place, and there is a context, and maybe around a mat, around a table, or under a tent, this is a place where you're signaling a safety, a familiarity, a shared culture. And underneath all that, when you've got a time and a place and something is happening, there are some subtle whys going on. It's a means of oblique self-expression. Again, particularly once you get into more extended narratives. We haven't had time to do that. But when you're telling a story about Jeha or Joha or the Hoja Nasruddin or whatever, you're leaning on this thing that belongs to the whole culture, but in a way, your contribution is a reveal. You're revealing something of yourself, what sort of a person you are. There's a safety in that. You can gradually show something by leaning on what is commonly owned, by showing that we all share this, we've all enjoyed it. So there's an oblique revelation of self, and then if you succeed, and sometimes it just happens that everything becomes very jolly and lively, and there's song and there's laughter. It just happens. There's enough energy. There's a transformation of energy, and the minute a mood is transformed, that is a sort of fundamental magic. And the one who's been able to either initiate that or be definitely someone who has played a part in that is empowered. There's a huge amount of self-esteem can be got from having been heard by others and by your contribution having affected a change. So this little stuff, it's a foundation for maybe bigger and more elaborate stuff. But once you get to this particular area here, which is the stories, huge extended stories some people have, and dilemma tales and all sorts of, there are millions of different categories of story, but suddenly you're working with very big themes. And as was said at the beginning, the values of a society are carried in this. Even in the nonsense, the fact that we tolerate and enjoy nonsense is showing that there's a value there of tolerance. So time has come to a stop. That's just what I wanted to share because I felt it would be good to do something practical straight away. But over the next 2 or 3 days, around those dinner tables, over coffee, anybody you meet who you've not spoken with before, here's some stuff to share. Let's try it. And hopefully when you go away, you'll be able to show all sorts of things at dinner parties that you've never been able to show before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben Haggarty, for this very enjoyable workshop that has involved everybody. And I think we have some minutes left for some question. Just in case, yeah, a couple of minutes. Okay, okay. If there's some question, please.
Any questions, observations?
I really enjoyed that, and it helped you rethink an awful lot of the cultural patterns and things that we do automatically, and reframe them in different ways. It really made me think about memory and how you don't necessarily, you can't necessarily follow the formula of remembering something from the past, and how this process is really uplifting, but it can also be really incredibly emotive in a challenging way. And I think that's quite interesting to consider, as well as the kind of joyous component that kind of happens in this experience. It's juxtaposed with a very kind of painful experience as well.
The lack of memory.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that's interesting is it's like a little trickle of a dam breaking. You think you can't remember, but gradually, by association, things begin to come. And then if you meet somebody who went to school with you, you know, and, oh yes, do you remember? Poof, suddenly it unpacks a lot more. But I think because some of it was learned at this very young age, there is a deep emotional something in there. You're right, absolutely. As well as, yes. And I remember, you know, there's this great note of the Song of Exile, and it's exile from youth and a place of happiness, in a way. But we have to sing that lament of exile because we might one day return and find it, and in a moment we're there. Trust me, can be there. Yeah.
Conscience of the culture. Sorry. I just wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit more about the kind of gender patterns that you find in some of these transmissions, because it seems to me that one of the sort of, you know, tragic aspects of the refugee crisis is that people are losing contact with their older generation, and particularly with the mothers and grandmothers and the women who seem to me to have a terrific social role in many cultures of this particular laying down of memory, of what Maria was saying, memory.
I mean, the whole issue of who are the main carriers of this sort of culture. Some of it is shared across the genders. Some of it is very much in the domain of the domestic and of, in certain societies, of women, because it's domestic. I mean, I've always felt that fairy tales, wonder tales, a lot of this is absolutely the repertoire of women, mothers, grandparents, and those who are looking after the children, widows, spinsters, all sorts of. There are many roles there where story is being created. There's this famous thing of the vocabularies of storytelling in many cultures are all around textiles and fabric production. You embroider a lie, you spin a yarn, you follow the thread of the tale, which suggests that story was told as a collective creation while you're all sitting around embroidering something. That's now in the past because machines have taken that work. But shelling peas and certain sort of sitting there food preparation things are creating spaces where storytelling can happen. It can happen in very, very many different locations. But the question of what belongs to the men, it's true that in many cultures, those who go travelling, the itinerant storytellers, tend to be male. The griots tend to be male. The ashops tend to be male because of the itinerant nature, the travelling. So they're also carrying perhaps a different sort of repertoire. And if they're earning money by it or performing at weddings or other sort of official functions, then they're using a lot of what one could call a male energy, but I have seen, in Central Asia, women are kings as doing just exactly what the men do. So it's not one or the other, but there's a tendency that the more public tends to be male. And then there are some people who have, within a community, though they're not necessarily paid for it, they are the repositories of knowledge. So in West Africa, there are certain definitely family groups, certain people with ritual functions who also are storytellers and are carrying that. And they can be men, marabouts, and they can also be women who are doing it. So I think there is a question about gender, but I think it can also be shared.
Ancient Sumerian, and is there a sense that some of them, these little rhymes, might have just been passed on right since when we were very first humans?
I would definitely say that about stories. Some of the stories that we're telling have been told. I mean, you mentioned my graphic novel Mesolith, and I'm not going to plug that, but it was a project where we wanted to see which stories still being told now could have been told 10,000 years ago, before Britain became an island, when we were hunter-gatherers in the Mesolithic period. And there are certain sorts of stories where you look at the functioning of what's happening in them and realize, well, this isn't dependent on an agricultural, the presence of agriculture. This isn't dependent on the presence of trade. The story can drop all the way back, and there's a horror story right at the beginning of it. I first encountered it as a story of a baby, of a man coming out of a pub in Manchester and hearing a baby crying and looking around and discovering a skip and lifting the tarpaulin and finding a baby in a Tesco bag in there. And he and his wife didn't have a child, so they took it home. It's one of the most ancient stories. You find it in New Guinea, you find it in South America. This baby in the middle of the night then eats everybody. It's a warning, don't meddle. If somebody's abandoned with a child, don't meddle with it. I mean, it's very, very ancient sort of stuff going on there. So some of this stuff is very old. And the archaeologists, the first shoe that they found had a lace. Guess what not? That lace was tied with. The bow, every time we tie our shoes, we're engaging in something 17,000 years old at least. So, fantastic.